make a quick, short video. So let's start by removing a band-aid, which for those who already follow my content, you already know is nothing new. At the end of the day, every relationship with a woman is transactional. As much as the P.O.as, the seduction gurus, say that there is a difference between transactional and validational sex. In short, transactional sex is when, in order to keep a woman and continue a relationship with her, a man has to become a provider, a partial or total provider. The complete provider, the woman will transition into the role of a housewife. In the case of a partial provider, she will continue to have her career and maintain her salary. Yet if you analyze it closely, the couple functions in a way where the majority of the expenses are covered by the man. The property is typically in his name, or he covers most of the mortgage payments. The car is his, and he handles all the related expenses. However, the woman also enjoys the benefits of using both the house and the car, essentially. That would be transactional relationship. The woman will only enter into a relationship with you if she sees some benefit. This is something that even abroad people call Brifeld's law. I think Roque made a video about this, which basically sums up that if the woman doesn't see that she'll get some benefit from having a relationship with you, she won't have a relationship with you. And that's why with this Me Too and yes means yes business, which are these false accusations and this withdrawal of consent, in other words, you get into a relationship with a woman and after weeks, months or years, you can withdraw her consent. Why is that? Even though often the guy is in a relationship with a woman, they're just dating, each has their own house, their own money and so forth. When they break up, or if the woman wants to move in together, but the man doesn't want to get married, leading to a breakup, the woman feels harmed. This is because even though she was paying her bills and having an equal relationship with a man, she was investing in the relationship with him. That's essentially the oral union, meaning you either pay up front or you end up paying later. And the women, along with their union, to ensure that you do pay. This is why women in cases of separation, particularly when the man is already married and they have a child together, have access to shared custody. In fact, she often has access to unilateral custody, meaning custody solely for her. Additionally, she has access to the sharing of assets. To be clear, she is entitled to assets she did not personally acquire, and quite often, she is also entitled to receive alimony. So the business is completely transactional. You either pay up front or later on. The government and society treat women as dependents, correct? Both legally and socially. When you have a relationship with a woman, she becomes your dependent. Society often ensures that you bear the cost of having a relationship with them. Thus, you will pay initially or you will pay afterward, and the entire arrangement remains transactional. That's exactly where the seduction gurus, relationship coaches, and puas make the mistake. They believe there's transactional sex, which is something you pay for either before or after, and then there's the validational relationship. By validational, that's the term, it means you become the kind of guy who's incredibly messed up yet so attractive. You know, someone who hits the gym regularly, takes care of himself in every way, a metrosexual and all those things. You turn into a big shot, and because of that, you're supposed to end up in a relationship with a woman. You will attract them, and then you'll say, but not paying anything. Well, you're not paying directly by being a provider. Essentially, you're paying by spending your time going to the gym, taking supplements, dressing in a certain way, buying clothes and watches, and maintaining a car that draws them in. You know, so if you have to spend your time doing that, whether you're a major provider or a significant catch, it all comes down to the fact that you're paying in some form. You're investing your limited time and resources to attract and maintain relationships with women. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or anything else, the effort and investment remain the same. So let's put an end to this notion that, no, I'm in a relationship and I've never paid for anything. You've paid, my friend. At the very least, you have paid with your time, right? Everyone here must have done that at some point. In fact, most of the people here have probably paid in one way or another in their relationship, whether it was before or after, or at the very least with their time. Because here's the thing, the woman, she'll enter a relationship with you for a while as an investment to see if you'll become the main provider, or to determine whether you'll grow as much in your career and financially as she anticipates, right? That's when the problems arise. She might eventually break up with you because you didn't meet her expectations, something I refer to as the burden of performance. Alternatively, you might decide to take the initiative to end the relationship, or you might not provide her with what she desires, and then comes that subtle accusation, the false accusation. But anyway, besides this initial problem of the relationship being transactional, the main point I want to emphasize now is that we are witnessing a lot of this issue that we have already talked about on my channel and during the live sessions, which is the issue of the fifth feminist wave, right? The fifth feminist wave is essentially the wave of conservatives, the wave of chameleons. Essentially, you're observing many women who are pretending to be right-wing, pretending to be conservative, and pretending to be religious. But if you put them together, it's the same group as the liberals and feminists, right? Actually, they're even more problematic because an exemptionist and a feminist, much like the conservatives, the religious, those on the right, in quotes, they aren't willing to give up feminist laws either. In fact, they are seeking even more feminist laws. It's evident that during this initial year of Bolsonaro's government, those who are right-wing, in quotes, conservatives and religious individuals, they too are advocating for more feminist rights. So it makes no difference, it's all the same. The difference is that one of them, a libertarian and a feminist, isn't willing to give up her career, right? To become a housewife, to be, oh my God, submissive, now patriarch, right? That's a certain security for the man, because even if there's a separation, whether he has a child or not, if the woman didn't want to give up her career, if she continued working and didn't become a housewife, the guy is less harmed. And at this point, women on the right, in quotes, religious conservatives, are actually worse, because they believe that just because they were born women, they have an inherent right to eventually have a relationship with a man who will make them into a housewife. Even if it's just a temporary housewife. Seriously, all of them, whether you're an exempt feminist, conservative, right-wing, religious, or whatever, or bababa, they all believe that a relationship with a man is a transactional business. This is true, except when they're quite young, being supported by their father or an educational institution. At that time, they can engage in casual relationships and enjoy being a slut. However, after they reach the epiphany phase, which occurs between the ages of 25 and 35, they begin to seek something more serious. They all desire a guy who will simplify their lives and be a substantial provider. Even that guy who says, no, but I'm a seduction guru, a relationship coach, I never pay anything. The guy is just having that validational relationship that the woman thinks he's great and continues to have a relationship with him. Even this guy will be pressured by the woman he's in a relationship with, if he's in a serious relationship, to become either a partial or total provider. That goes for all of them. They all desire that. However, there's a critical detail. It is on what is expected and the level of investment involved. Consider an independent feminist who is not willing to sacrifice her career. If the relationship, fails to meet her expectations, or if you decide to end the relationship, the risk of being accused, is slightly reduced, perhaps a bit less severe. This is because she won't feel as harmed. She didn't anticipate becoming reliant on you. She still has her career and money, whether it runs out or not, doesn't matter. But for the so-called right-wing religious conservatives, it's worse. So she has higher expectations to start and maintain the relationship. And she wants to be a housewife, right? That's the issue. The higher her expectations and perceived investment in a relationship, the more you must maintain it, right? I've already made a video about this, saying that the modern relationship is basically extortion. And she thinks she's investing in you, because in her head, she thinks she could be with another man. And that's why there's going to be this idea that, no, if the relationship ends and you take the initiative to end it, she's going to want to accuse you. She'll want to get her money back. It's not just because they are men, okay? Statistically speaking, men tend to be more capable and independent than women. Now, there's another important issue I'd like to discuss, which is this. If you listen carefully to this audio here, you'll notice that we have this underlying premise. Since the second feminist wave, particularly during the 60s and 70s, women have increasingly demanded more from men while offering less in return. They're increasingly demanding more and more because when you empower a woman, she doesn't just become more independent, she actually becomes more demanding, right? Since the 1980s, women have been the majority in public higher education institutions here in Brazil. Furthermore, there's another aggravating factor, which is that due to this focus on study, empowerment, and women's work, along with this discourse of equality, they started with this second, third, and even fourth day of work nonsense, She's living with a man, and even though he pays most of the bills, and she does some of the housework, she already considers it a second job. If she has a child, which they usually pressure the man to have, taking care of the child will be considered, in her mind, a third day. If she has an elderly or dependent relative, or even a pet, she'll consider it a fourth day. So, you see, with each generation and every decade that has gone by, they have progressively become more and more demanding, right? There is this constantly increasing expectation for male servitude and male utilitarianism, while they are offering less and less in return. And then there's the sexual aspect. Here's a question for everyone listening. How many of you have ex-girlfriends who not only began their sexual lives before you did, but also had more sexual partners than you? There's already that, isn't there? So it's not just the behavior that's becoming more toxic, they're becoming increasingly demanding, but they're also becoming less appealing to men due to their history and their behavior. And then we fall into this cycle, this destructive cycle, this, how should I say it, this self-fulfilling prophecy that unfolds like this, right? Men realize it's not worth it. Many men say they lived alone for years, even before hearing about MGTOW, and got used to it, enjoying solitude. So these men enjoy being alone. They're accustomed to it. Meanwhile, women's demands and toxic behavior keep rising, and every single time the guy attempts to assess the situation like this, oh, do I go back to the dating market? Do I try to find a new partner? They slowly notice their behavior deteriorating. Because you see, women aren't in the mood to renegotiate the existing social contract between the sexes. They're not inclined to, let's say, repeal some feminist law or make any reforms. No, they're behaving in a completely different manner. They're acting in a totally immature, childish way, throwing a tantrum. I want such and such a thing. I have to get such and such a thing. If they don't give me such and such a thing, I'm going to get even angrier. That's exactly what's happening here. And in this fifth wave, which is fine, we've already put all these groups of women together in the same category because the relationship is utilitarian. They want a guy to make their lives easier, but they don't want to give up empowerment. They don't want to give up feminist law. Even the empowerment part already complicates everything, you know? Because if they begin to demand quotas and affirmative action in both the public and private sectors, they need to realize that opportunities, not only academic, but also professional, are limited. Consequently, there will be fewer and fewer men available on the market who are considered good enough in her eyes. You see, for her to be in a relationship with a guy who will make her life easier, that guy needs to be at least on the same level as she is or even above her. And we can already observe Agenda 2030 and Planet 5050 interfering with this situation more and more. So if you take a closer look and analyze it, basically there seems to be no clear solution. What will happen is that guys are going to distance themselves even further and further away. Most likely the men who are still actively searching for a partner, those who are willing to get married and have children, are going to be perceived by women as men who aren't quite good enough. This is because they might not possess enough status or resources to be deemed attractive to them, right? Or quite often these guys might even possess status or resources, yet they still don't find them physically attractive enough. This is also another result of sexual liberation, where women begin their sexual experiences earlier than men and tend to have more partners throughout their lives than men do. But now let us explore why they are becoming increasingly angrier and angrier, why they are turning more and more toxic, and why they are getting more and more upset. It's quite straightforward. It's not only about the expectation that they are entitled to have a relationship with a man who is superior to them, someone who will simplify their lives and make everything easier for them. Moreover, with the additional frustration caused by the more right-wing, so-called religious and conservative women, they have this belief that they possess a divine right. Essentially, just because they were born female, they feel entitled to act in a manner that leads them to find a man who will transform her into a housewife. In this scenario, she believes she won't need to work to earn a living, correct? It's not only that, but it's also because women today, those from Generation Y and Generation Z, they are noticing that they are facing more challenges than their mothers, aunts, and grandmothers did in the past, right? All these women from earlier generations, they weren't as empowered. They got married at a younger age and had fewer sexual partners. Isn't that right? Because back then, during those times, not only were they less demanding, but men had greater opportunities to work and study, which placed them at a higher level. They not only succeeded in finding a partner, which helped make their lives much easier and allowed them to feel more satisfied, but also because men during that period were generally more generous and had more resources. Quite a few of them even went through the process of filing for divorce, and when they did file for divorce, they often received half of the apartment or even the entire apartment in some cases. Additionally, they were granted alimony and were able to secure custody of the children. So you see, even in the past generations, women whose relationships didn't work out ended up sacrificing the relationship itself. And even then it was considered a win-win situation, don't you think? The ones who really won the most were those women whose relationships worked out well and who stayed with their husbands, right? And so you see this younger generation, they are more demanding when it comes to resources, largely because of their empowerment and the opportunities they have now. They're more demanding sexually due to sexual liberation. However, there are fewer men in the market who are above them and generous enough to be with them. Additionally, feminist laws have affected men and women from past generations negatively. The detail is that several generations of men have been negatively impacted in the family court. And the men of the younger generations, they've learned their lesson, right? It's that old story. The guy's like, oh, I've never heard of MGTOW, but oh, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have a child because of this, and that. Sometimes the guy saw a father who got screwed in the family court. Sometimes the guy has seen an uncle, even a brother or a close friend. I've seen guys younger than me who already screwed up in the family court. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's why women are increasingly becoming angrier. They are not willing to give up their rights. And that's why they're getting more and more assertive, right? I don't foresee this situation improving anytime soon. Probably in a decade or two, we might end up like Japan. However, an intriguing point to consider in this context is the following. It's that people often wonder, why don't the MGTOW just keep quiet? Or even the guys from the men's right movement, why don't they just keep quiet? Especially the MGTOW, why don't they go their separate ways and stop complaining? Because here's the thing, like I mentioned, women have this expectation of either being partially or fully provided for. They believe that simply because they were born as women, they should have an easier life, right? That applies to everyone, whether they are left-wing, right-wing, exempt, or anything else. There is already a quote, a testimony I've seen repeated multiple times on Facebook and Twitter, and it goes like this. I'm talking about today's women in their 30s and 40s, in the coming years, Gen Y and Gen Z. They are already openly expressing that if they cannot find a partner who is above them or at the same level as them to act as a partial or total provider, essentially to offer them a more comfortable life because they believe it's their right. They feel that when they are in a relationship with a man, they are making an investment in him and expect to receive a return on that investment. The arrangement is entirely transactional. They are already making it extremely clear that if they can't manage on their own, in other words, a man coming together with them, getting married, forming a stable union and providing them with an easier life, regardless of whether she eventually ends up getting a divorce and taking advantage of that man, they believe it must be considered bad. The government must step in, and if men aren't ready to support the women, then the government will be the one to support them. We know how this operates, through taxes and public funds that men contribute to. Ultimately, in the minds of women, with their expectations, they believe that just because they are women, you as a man in society living alongside them are obligated to support them for their well-being and benefit. Or even worse, there's absolutely no way to escape. So here's my question. We already understand that the government is completely cuckoo, both on the left and the right. They're just surrendering everything that women are demanding. The real question is, how long will this continue? How long will there be enough resources to support all of this? That's really the point, right? But also to conclude, there is a specific aggravating factor when it comes to Brazilian women in comparison to both European and North American women. This factor is that we are aware we won't have the financial means to sustain this level of entitlement, which can be referred to as feminist privilege. This is primarily because Brazil is not as wealthy as those countries in Europe and North America. Furthermore, it lacks a welfare state that is as generous as theirs due to this. Because it is not a particularly wealthy country, Brazil does not have a very high GDP to sustain all of this. As a result, when it comes to Brazilian women, they often become more toxic, angrier, and more frustrated, which leads to pushing men away even further because of the following reasons. Since Brazil is not a rich nation with a generous welfare system, Brazilian women are significantly more reliant on men for support compared to women in Europe or North America. It's not to suggest that North American and European women aren't reliant on men. They are indeed reliant on men as well. But the dependency is channeled through the welfare state, feminist rights, various laws and benefits. Since Brazil is a less affluent country and cannot sustain such a generous welfare system, Brazilian women find themselves much more directly reliant on men, particularly on the relationships they maintain with them. And when it comes to boyfriends, and especially husbands, this is what has happened up until that point. The women of the baby boomer generation, as well as Generation 10, who were still able to get married and have children, no matter if they stay with the man or not, have really made quite a substantial withdrawal. There is the inheritance, there is the division of assets, there are the children, and everything else she gains by being with him. After all, the relationship was largely transactional. In this particular situation, the Brazilian woman finds herself in a position where she is significantly more reliant on the direct relationship she maintains with men. This reliance is due to her being partially or even entirely supported by them. The situation is further complicated by the fact that not only are some men avoiding even casual relationships, while others are merely dating, but in general, all of them are contributing to this dynamic. In a large group such as this one, who can really say how many percent it would be? They are making the decision that they don't want to get married, that they don't want to have children, and at most, they might just want to be together with someone for a while. This is a significant blow for them. In their minds, they believe that being born as women gives them the right to a life that is easier, the right to have someone care for them. So, when this doesn't happen, they see it as an act of aggression. In their minds, it feels like a great victimization. That's the detail that matters.